You ever feel it? That cold weight in your gut when you turn onto a road that shouldn't exist. Like the pavement itself is watching you, waiting for you to break down, to stop, to need help. Some places were never meant to be traveled after dark. And some highways, they never really let you go. Welcome to Podpulse house. I'm glad you're here tonight. Settle in, turn down the lights, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just another campfire story. This one, it stays with you. It's the story of Route 29, a stretch of forgotten asphalt that eats people alive. I first heard about Route 29 when I was still too young to know better, the kind of age where danger feels like a rumor told by cautious old men and restless mothers. It was one of those back roads you learn to avoid without ever really being told why. There were no warning signs, no flashing billboards, just an unspoken agreement between the locals. You didn't drive that way alone, and you sure as hell didn't stop if you did. I didn't believe any of it, of course. Not back then. Ghost stories. Urban legends. Every town had them, and every skeptic thought they were smarter than fear. It wasn't until the fall of 2003, a wet October night dripping with the kind of mist that made headlights useless, that I ended up there by accident. I was driving south, heading nowhere special, a coffee burning cold in the passenger seat, an old radio station crackling static through my speakers. The main highway was shut down, some pile up miles back, and my GPS, still a clunky piece of early tech back then, chirped for me to reroute. Left turn. Then another. Then a long, empty stretch that seemed to bleed out into the fog. I didn't even notice the sign as I passed it. Route 29. Just two numbers nailed to a leaning wooden post, swallowed by vines and thyme. At first, it seemed harmless enough. 2 lanes, one strip of faded yellow down the middle, occasional trees clawing at the stars above. But as the minutes ticked on, something shifted. The air inside the car grew heavy, like the world outside was pressing inward, suffocating. My cell phone lost service. The radio spat white noise. Even the engine, a stubborn old thing that never quit on me before, began to hum in strange, uneven breaths. The rational part of my brain told me it was the weather. Wet air, bad signal, an old car and tired eyes. But there was a deeper part, something buried in my bones, that knew better. I wasn't alone out there. I kept driving, knuckles whitening around the steering wheel, telling myself stories, logical ones, like a man whistling past a graveyard. And that's when I saw it, a flash of something in the rearview mirror. A pair of headlights, maybe half a mile back. I felt that cold drip of adrenaline flood my veins, the kind that comes without reason but refuses to be ignored. The lights stayed with me for miles, never gaining, never falling behind. Just there. Like a shadow pacing a heartbeat behind. I tapped the brakes. The lights slowed. I sped up. They sped up. Not enough to seem aggressive, just enough to let me know they were paying attention. At the time, I told myself it could be anyone. Another driver rerouted off the main highway, just like me. Maybe someone even more lost than I was. I told myself a lot of things back then, things to keep the fear from cracking my ribs open. But deep down, I knew. Route 29 wasn't just another back road. It was something else. Something that weighed. I never stopped that night. I never broke down, never gave the road a reason to keep me. Maybe that's why I'm here now, telling you this story instead of being another X on some forgotten map. But when I finally peeled off onto the interstate, heart hammering like a drum in my throat, I made a promise to myself. I'd find out why people feared Route 29. I'd find out why it felt alive, and the more I dug, the more I wished I hadn't. Women, dozens of them, had disappeared along that lonely stretch over the years. Different towns, different seasons, but always the same spine-chilling story. A stalled car, a stranger offering help, a final phone call that never made it through. Some were found days later, wandering half-mad along the tree lines. Some were found much later, buried deep where no road ever went. And some were never found at all. What haunts me most is how easy it was to erase them. No camera footage. No witnesses. No easy answers. Just lost faces printed on the back of gas station receipts, fluttering in the breeze as if trying to find their way home. Law enforcement blamed runaways, bad luck, even the weather. But those of us who live close enough to smell the rain off that highway, we know better. We know the road itself is hungry. When I started chasing this story, I thought I'd find a man, a predator, a monster with a name and a face. I thought there would be footprints in the mud, cigarette butts in a ditch, fibers left on torn clothing. Something tangible. Something human. But the more I learned, the more the evidence slipped through my fingers like mist. As if whatever stalked Route 29 wasn't bound by the rules I understood. As if it could be here, right now, just out of sight, listening. Waiting. Some people say it's just a killer who learned how to use the landscape, the radio dead zones, the blind turns, the forgotten service roads, like tools. Some people say it's something older than memory, a hunger rooted in the soil long before the first tire tread kissed that pavement. I'm not here to tell you which is true. That's for you to decide. All I can tell you is what I felt. And what I found. And it starts, like all good nightmares, with a road that should have stayed buried. Stick with me. We're just getting started. The first time I really understood what Route 29 could do to a person, it wasn't from the newspapers, and it sure wasn't from any police report. It came from one case. One face. A name that stuck in my mind like a splinter I couldn't pull out, no matter how much time passed. Alicia Matthews. She was 23 years old when she vanished. A nursing student from a small town called Remington, the kind of place where everyone still waved at each other on the sidewalks, where trouble was supposed to be something that happened somewhere else. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't naive. She did everything you're supposed to do when your car breaks down, stayed near the vehicle, kept her phone handy, called for help. She played by the rules, and still, the road swallowed her whole. I found her story buried in a forgotten thread of old news clippings, a few blurred photographs, and a scattering of frantic forum posts written by people who were scared to even mention Route 29 by name. Her parents, desperate and sleepless, had plastered missing posters across 5 counties. Local news covered her disappearance for a few days. Then they moved on. Just another missing girl. Just another tragedy no one wanted to think about. 3 weeks after she vanished, hunters found her body deep in the woods, 30 miles from where her car had been abandoned. 30 miles. I read that line over and over again, trying to make sense of it. No signs of a struggle, no obvious injuries, no cause of death that a coroner could stamp neatly on a certificate. The final verdict they gave her family was exposure. As if that single, clinical word could explain everything. As if a healthy, sharp young woman would simply wander barefoot through dense forest, across rivers and ravines, in the dead of October, until she lay down and gave up. But there was more. Details that made no sense no matter how hard I tried to rationalize them. Her shoes were missing, yes, but her socks were clean. Pristine, almost, as if she'd been carried instead of walking all that way herself. The buttons on her jacket were neatly fastened, even though nighttime temperatures had dipped below freezing. There were no signs of animal predation. No defensive wounds. No bruises that would suggest a struggle. Just Alicia, laid out in the mossy undergrowth like she had fallen asleep, or been placed there carefully, purposeful. Her phone, her bag, her ID, gone. Never recovered. Just a hole in her story where a future used to be. I remember sitting at my desk long after midnight, the glow of the screen burning my eyes, reading and rereading every dry sentence of her case file, every desperate post her family had made online. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing there was no bottom, just endless black stretching out beneath you. I started thinking about that night she disappeared. About the decisions she must have made in those final hours. Her car broke down just south of Culpeper. A dead zone for cell service even today, full of dense woods and narrow roads that all look the same when the sun dips behind the trees. She'd called her boyfriend once, left a voicemail saying she was fine, that she was waiting for a tow truck. That was the last anyone ever heard from her. The tow truck company she supposedly called never received a dispatch. Her phone records, what little they could retrieve, showed a strange 3-minute call to an unknown number right after. A number that, according to carrier records, didn't exist. Like dialing into a, police theorized she accepted a ride from a good Samaritan. Someone she trusted enough to leave her car behind. Maybe she thought it was safer to wait somewhere warm. Maybe she had no choice. Maybe the wrong person stopped when she had no other options left. But the more I read, the less I believed it was that simple. Route 29 has a reputation, even among truckers and locals, for being a place where technology falters. Cell towers thin out, radios flicker to static, and GPS devices start spinning their wheels. Some blame the thick mineral deposits beneath the Blue Ridge Mountains. High concentrations of magnetite and iron-rich soils that can interfere with electromagnetic signals. It's a real phenomenon, a logical explanation. But logic has never comforted me much when it comes to that. I kept thinking about Alicia's clean socks. About the neat way her jacket was buttoned. About the impossibility of her walking 30 miles without a single scratch or torn thread on her clothing. It didn't add up. Not unless someone, or something, moved her. Carried her like a doll across impossible terrain. Placed her down gently, like a grim offering to the earth. And there was something else that no one talked about. Something I found hidden in an old handwritten note from the original investigator, filed away in the bowels of a public records office. Scrawled in the margin, almost an afterthought, witnesses report seeing a man standing near her car. Tall, wearing a uniform. No patrol units logged in the area at that time. A uniform. Authority. Trust. It would explain why Alicia let her guard down. Why she would leave the relative safety of her broken car to walk into the arms of a stranger. Because when you're scared and stranded on a lonely road, and someone with a badge or an official patch shows up, you don't think twice. You just hope they're there to help. I closed the file that night with shaking hands. I stared at the black window beside me, half expecting to see headlights flare in the darkness. Alicia was the first case that cracked something open inside me. She wasn't just a missing girl. She was proof. Proof that whatever haunted Route 29 wasn't a random monster. It was patient. It was methodical. It knew how to wear a mask when it needed to. It knew how to make you feel safe just long enough to disappear you without a sound. And somehow, in some quiet, haunted corner of my mind, I knew this wasn't just about Alicia. She was just the beginning. There were more. There were always more. And the road was still hungry. After Alicia Matthews, I couldn't let it go. I tried. For a few weeks, I shoved her file into a locked drawer and promised myself I'd move on, like everyone else seemed to. But it festered. It crawled at the edges of my thoughts like ivy climbing a crumbling wall. Every time I drove alone at night, I saw the ghost of her reflection in the rearview mirror. Every time static crackled over the radio, my fingers tightened on the steering wheel without even thinking. Route 29 had laid a hook deep inside me, and it was pulling, slowly and surely, towards something I didn't yet understand. I told myself if I could find a pattern, some logical thread tying the disappearances together, I could solve it. Or at least, explain it. Rationalize it. Make the road feel smaller. Safer. Containable. It was a fool's hope, but fools and the desperate aren't all that different when you strip them down to the bone. I started building a map. Old school, not digital. I didn't trust anything electronic when it came to Route 29. Too many things went wrong when signals got involved. I pinned a giant paper map to my wall, filled it with red strings and black dots. Each missing person got their own marker, a tiny memorial that bled into the others like drops of ink on wet cloth. At first glance, the dots seemed random. scattered. Victims ranging from their teens to their 40s. Some traveling alone, some in pairs. Different seasons, different times of day. But the deeper I looked, the more shape began to emerge, half hidden like a watermark under layers of noise. Every disappearance clustered around certain pockets of the highway, stretches where cell towers dropped off, where service roads twisted away from the main lanes like veins splitting off a dying heart. Places where help was never more than a promise you couldn't quite reach. It wasn't just random bad luck. It was surgical, precise, and there was something else. Almost every case, almost every last one, had reports of static interference on phones and radios in the hours leading up to the victim's last known location. Not just dead zones. Active interference. Phones ringing with no caller ID. Text messages made up of scrambled numbers and broken words. Car radios slipping from their stations into garbled whispers and mechanical screams. I dug into the science behind it. Infrasound, low-frequency sound waves, usually below the threshold of human hearing, can cause confusion, anxiety, even hallucinations if the exposure is strong enough. It's real. Military-grade research backs it. Some believe that certain natural formations, like mountain ridges and fault lines, can generate infrasound during specific weather conditions. It messes with your equilibrium, your perception of time, even your emotions. Makes you feel watched. Hunted. Route 29 snakes along the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, a place full of underground caves and shifting stone beds. Conditions that could, theoretically, create natural infrasound. Enough to scramble your senses. Enough to make you pull over when you shouldn't. Enough to make you see headlights that aren't really there. Hear footsteps that never touch the ground. That theory gave me a little comfort. For a while. At least it was something I could cling to. A scientific explanation for the things no one wanted to talk about. But then I found the tape. It wasn't labeled. Just a dusty cassette buried in the evidence archive from another case. Victoria Hale, 27, last seen July 2007. Her family had found the tape recorder abandoned in her car after she went missing. The police didn't make much of it. They chalked it up to a faulty device, a glitch. They didn't listen to the whole thing. But it started normal. Victoria's voice, bright and steady, recording notes for herself, reminders, a grocery list, a bit of idle conversation meant to pass the time on a long drive. Then the static rolled in, soft at first, like a wind brushing across a microphone. Victoria paused, laughed nervously, said she must be driving through a bad patch. Then the static deepened, thickened. It began to pulse, almost like a heartbeat buried beneath layers of broken signal. And under that, another sound. Not a voice exactly, but not just noise either. Something between a whisper and a mechanical whine, threading through the gaps in the static like a needle pulling stitches into frayed cloth. Victoria's breathing quickened. She muttered something, I couldn't make it out, and the tape jittered with a burst of harsh sound. Then, clear as glass, her voice cut through. I can see him now. He's standing in the road. Silence. 5 long minutes of nothing but the low hum of the tape spinning on blank air. She was never seen again. I sat there for hours after that, the tape recorder spinning dead in my hand, the darkness outside my windows feeling too thick, too close. It wasn't just about getting lost. It wasn't just about breaking down or picking the wrong stranger to trust. Something out there was drawing them in, breaking their sense of time, their sense of safety, pulling them off the map until even memory couldn't find them anymore. Static as a weapon. Sound as a lure. A force that didn't just wait for you to stumble into it, but reached out, tugging you off course, one wrong turn at a time. And the more I mapped the disappearances, the clearer the pattern became. Each victim didn't just vanish near Route 29, they vanished after reporting strange electrical disturbances. After losing time. After seeing something, or someone, standing still in the road ahead. There was an intelligence behind it. A patience. a knowledge of exactly when and where to strike, and it wasn't finished, not by a long shot. After hearing Victoria's last words on that tape, I couldn't sleep properly for weeks. Every night, the static seemed to leak into my dreams, a low, vibrating hum that pressed against my bones and stirred the edges of my thoughts into chaos. And every morning when I woke, that same question waited for me like a patient, hungry thing sitting at the foot of my bed. Why them? Why then? Patterns. That's why I kept telling myself. If I could just find the patterns, maybe I could find the thing behind them too. Maybe I could catch a glimpse of whatever had been hiding in the cracks of Route 29 long before Alicia or Victoria ever set foot there. So I went deeper. I stopped focusing on where the disappearances happened and started asking when. I pulled every missing person report, every police dispatch, every scrap of data I could find on Route 29 over the last 30 years. At first, it looked like chaos. Random dates. Random seasons. Daylight, nighttime, cloudy, clear, no obvious pattern on the surface. But then I noticed something. Something small, something easy to miss if you weren't looking hard enough. The times. Almost every disappearance happened during a specific window, a 2-hour slice of the night when the world seems to hold its breath. Between 11:43 p.m. and 1:13 a.m. Over and over again, that same window appeared. Sometimes by minutes, sometimes by seconds. It didn't matter if it was summer or winter, weekday or holiday. That gap, that narrow, razor-edged window of time, was when the road took its due. I called it the vanishing hour. There's something about that stretch of night, scientifically speaking. Human circadian rhythms dip to their lowest point around midnight, body temperature drops, reaction times slow, cognitive function wavers. The body gets sluggish, the mind starts to drift. It's the hour when you're least alert, least rational. Vulnerable. But deep down, I didn't think biology was the whole story. I didn't believe this thing, whatever it was, just got lucky preying on sleepy drivers. No. It chose that hour because it knew. Because it needed more than just physical weakness. It needed you halfway between asleep and awake. It needed you disoriented enough to believe the impossible when you saw it standing in front of you. I started interviewing survivors, the very few who made it off the highway with nothing worse than a story no one believed. Most didn't want to talk. Some refused altogether. But the ones who did, they all spoke of the same sensations. A feeling of drifting, like their cars were moving without them. A sudden, suffocating sense that they were no longer alone inside their own vehicles. And always, the radio, filling with a soft, crackling pulse that seemed almost inviting. Like a hand reaching through the static, beckoning them off the road. One woman told me she thought she'd fallen asleep at the wheel, only to wake up parked on the shoulder with no memory of stopping. Another man swore he saw flashing lights in his rearview mirror, but when he pulled over, there was nothing behind him but empty asphalt stretching on forever. All of it happening inside that 2-hour window. The vanishing hour wasn't just a coincidence. It was a ritual. A feeding time. And it made me wonder, was it the road itself? Some old, rotting stretch of earth soaked in blood and sorrow, pulling travelers into its belly? Or was it something that moved along the road like a predator stalking a favorite hunting ground? The more I studied, the more the vanishing hour felt less like an accident of nature, and more like a door. A door that opened just wide enough, just long enough, for something else to slip through. Something that didn't belong here. Something that shouldn't exist, but does. Alicia. Victoria. The others. They hadn't just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. They had been caught standing at the threshold when the door creaked open, unable to tell the difference between a road leading home and a road leading nowhere. I think about Alicia's voicemail sometimes. The way she said she was fine. Waiting for a tow. Her voice calm, steady, reassuring. She didn't know she was already lost. She didn't know something had already touched her, tangled its fingers in her fate, guiding her steps off the map and into a place no one could follow. None of them knew. And that thought terrifies me more than anything else, that you can be standing still, thinking you're safe, thinking you're grounded in reality, while underneath, the ground has already started to give way, sliding you gently, almost lovingly, into the dark. And the worst, that door, the one I believe exists somewhere out there, yawning wide during those 2 cursed hours, it doesn't just pull you in all at once. It leaks, seeps into your mind, long before you realize anything is wrong. The static, the distortions, the strange gaps in time, they aren't side effects. They are the invitation. And once you hear it, once you tune into that hidden frequency humming just beneath the surface of the world you know, you're already halfway gone. I stared at my map one night, candles flickering against the dark like tiny, desperate stars, tracing the tiny, precise points where lives had been unspooled. It felt like looking at a pulse, the heartbeat of something vast and sleeping, only waking briefly each night to feed before slipping back into whatever shadowy place it called home. And I knew I couldn't stop now, because the vanishing hour was coming again, and this time, I would be ready for it. I should have stopped. I should have looked at that wall of missing faces and walked away before it swallowed me too. But curiosity has teeth. It gnaws at you slow and steady, and by the time you feel the blood, it's already too late. After piecing together the vanishing hour, I realized something the authorities had missed, or maybe something they just didn't want to see. The places where people vanished, they weren't random roadside breakdowns. Almost every single one of them was near dense patches of woods. Thick, old-growth forest that pressed against Route 29 like a dark tide held back only by crumbling asphalt. It wasn't the road alone that was dangerous. It was what waited just beyond it. So I went looking. I picked a night when the moon was a thin, weak sliver barely clinging to the sky. No flashlight, just instinct and a battered old notebook in my jacket pocket. I parked on the shoulder where Victoria Hale's car had been found all those years ago. The highway buzzed in my ears, a low mechanical hum that faded with every step I took into the tree lane. Inside the woods, everything changed. The air felt thicker, heavier, like wading through unseen webs. The trees were ancient, gnarled things, their branches clawing at each other above my head, shutting out what little starlight there was. Every footstep was swallowed in damp earth and moss, like the ground itself was trying to smother the sound of my passing. And then, the whispers started. At first, I thought it was just the wind. That's what you always tell yourself, isn't it? Just the breeze. Just your imagination. But no, the trees were deathly still. Not a single leaf stirred. The whispering seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a soft, rasping susurration that rose and fell like breathing. I couldn't make out words. Not at first. But I could feel the meaning. Turn back. Leave this place. You are not welcome here. Still, I pressed on. Curiosity gnawing. Fear clinging to my spine like frost. It wasn't long before I found something. A small clearing, almost perfectly circular, where the trees refused to grow. In the center, half buried under dead leaves and brittle twigs, was a pile of objects, broken watches, cracked glasses, shredded pieces of fabric so weathered the colors had long since bled away. Personal items. Things left behind by people who had never come back. I knelt there, fingers trembling as I brushed dirt away from a shattered cell phone. The screen was dark. Dead. But for a moment, just a moment, I swore I saw it flicker to life. A single frame. A single image burned into my mind, headlights floating in blackness, and something standing between them. Something tall, crooked, its arms too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle like it was listening. I dropped the phone. I ran. The woods didn't fight me. They let me go. For now, when I stumbled back onto the road, gasping, the highway seemed almost kind in comparison. Artificial. Safe. I sat on the hood of my car for a long time, staring back at the tree line, half expecting to see something watching from the shadow, but the woods had already given me their warning. Next time, I might not be so lucky, and still, despite everything, the pull remained. There were answers buried in that darkness. Pieces of the puzzle still waiting for someone stubborn or foolish enough to dig them up. The whispers hadn't chased me away. They had only deepened the mystery. They had only made me hungry. And that's where I'll leave it for tonight, friends. Right there, standing on the edge of the trees, heart pounding, knowing the real journey was just beginning. If you've been pulled into this mystery as much as I have, don't forget to like and subscribe to Podpulse House. It really helps us keep chasing the shadows that most people are too scared to even acknowledge. And hey, if you have any questions, theories, or even suggestions for where I should dig next, drop them in the comments. I read every single one, and next time, who knows? Your idea just might shape the journey. And remember, no matter how dark it gets, no matter how deep into the unknown we go, you're not alone. We're in this together. A community of curious souls chasing the truth, 1 mile marker at a time. Stay curious. Stay cautious. And until next time, keep your headlights bright and your radio tuned low. You never know what you might hear in the static.